Okay, so it's been over a week. Is that right? About a week. How you been?
I think I have been wonderful. I am very much more adventuresome with food. I went yesterday to a women's group that I belong to.
Mm-hmm.
I saw high-powered business women, and I told them the truth about me. And we all speak for a few minutes to let each other know how to use each other in business.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them about my bulimia, and I mean they're middle-aged, very few, very young people, but they all have, they have children and grandchildren and people who are probably faced with bulimia. And if they need my help, I'd be glad to assist.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very adventurous. I eat all the different foods that are put in front of me, and I feel plumper, and I'm okay with it. Marshall and Amanda have provided probiotics that actually work. I am keeping the digestion is my biggest problem.
Yeah, well, you may have some permanent damage that might have been done. The esophagus, your esophagus, when you chronically purge, can be impacted. Just that overall, your the valve between the stomach and the the pyloric valve, and the valve that keeps your food down into the stomach, that can lose its elasticity, and so there's damages that it can cause.
Right, I'm pretty sure you're right, but my children spare no expense at all for anything.
Mm-hmm.
How he got to be my son, I do not know. But because I have been so cheap his whole life, I'm not anymore. It's like it's all for me now.
Here's the thing: children learn both directions from their parents. They don't just take what's right; they change what's wrong. You know what I mean? Like they have. It's just it's how we all do it. You could say you did that with your own. Yeah, and you. Right. Well, and you could say you did that with your own parents. You took what you felt was beneficial, and you abandoned what you didn't. And it's like we're a better version of our parents, I think.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Anyway,
That's what you want.
They have in the event that you have anybody else with this problem, they have. It's called sauerkraut. Is, boy, I cannot go downstairs and figure it out. I think it's called farmland. And I get it at Sprouts. Not everyone has Sprouts. But it's sauerkraut, and I absolutely love sauerkraut. Yeah,
and a probiotic.
And it is probiotic.
So it helps the digestive process.
It helps keep the food. I'm not like sitting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, hard swallowing, and running downstairs to get some ice so that I don't throw it up. And it's just, I am now eating and drinking and pooping and.
Are you taking a diuretic?
I'm still not sleeping.
Yeah.
And the doctor called me yesterday. I'm tested every week.
Yeah.
I've been out of the hospital. I said, your kidneys are nearly normal. I had kidney failure.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what an amazing body.
No kidding. How forgiving is it, right?
Oh, it works so hard. It works so hard to keep you here.
I hear you.
To a fault, right? It's like, God damn it. But what a great opportunity.
I have done everything I've been told to do, and
yes,
so
good.
I take credit for some of it, but my body is pretty spectacular.
Right.
It is so forgiving, and it was hideous. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and the kidney specialists were not sure what to do. And here I am, and he phoned me yesterday. I know him very well. And he says, you know, as long as you keep eating, keeping it down, and drinking as much water as you can, you should drink your weight in water.
He's joking. Yeah, but that's not real. He's basically just saying you need to overdrink. Like, drink as much as you can right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the first weeks, I still had up and down calcium and potassium and whatever it is. But I'm doing everything I can to be a healthy, grateful, authentic human. And other than having little air in my lung, I also punctured a lung a couple of years ago, so it is acting up. But I am loving the woman I am becoming, and I appreciate how ridiculous I have been and how harshly I have treated myself. Good grief.
Okay.
But I do feel like I am in the absolute right direction. I'm leaving for Minneapolis tomorrow, and
Well, you must be feeling better to be able to do that, which is wonderful.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm feeling. I mean, I let them know they are not the ones that came. Marshall is the one that came.
Mm-hmm.
That I am not, and this is the family. It's like I love you, love you, love you. And the 7-year-old and it's her 7th birthday, and I are absolutely dearly connected, but I cannot. And she's out of school Thursday and Friday when I arrive, and it's like I cannot do 12-hour days with her.
Mm-hmm.
We have to find some activity, and she does have a whole family there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the only one who can ever babysit for her, but I mean, it's by her request.
Yeah, she wants to be with you.
So anyway, we'll have a great time. We will not do all the things that we have done in the past. We'll do as much as we can.
I'm curious to how this visit is going to be different in terms of how you function without all probably the criticism that you might have brought to the table before.
Yeah.
You know, when you're living in that type of like self survival, everything is always around you're bad, you're good, you're doing things wrong, you're doing things right. You know, there's always this need to make things right or wrong and right and wrong and right and wrong because that's what it's like your survival's way of controlling insecurity. So without that, how you will relate to these people.
I know.
It's going to be really wonderful for you.
And my son has me drive him to the bus so that I have his car all day.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I needed the car all day is so that I could, more there than anywhere else, I would go eat and puke. I mean, with the car.
Yeah, you had your freedom to.
I'm gonna do.
Right. Well, you don't. No, you won't be bored. You're gonna probably be more engaged in reality and involved. Yeah. It's gonna feel different. It should feel different because you're feeling different, and you don't want to do those things. There's no point to those things anymore. It's like, again, that's part of that survival of me. You know. Yeah, and when you don't have the survival of me anymore, all of a sudden you can just exist in this space and really feel connected with these people, right? This is your grandchildren, your granddaughter?
Yeah, and
yeah, you can exist with her.
I have the honor of the others from the family that he was divorced from. You know, children have been very estranged from him. But I think that at least one of them will be very glad that I'm there. And I'm thrilled to be honest with her. I mean, she's 15 years old. She can hear about bulimia.
Yeah. Well, and you know what it is. It's not. I want you to kind of reframe from identifying by bulimia and more so by body image, because the whole concept of, I mean, dieting is a form of bulimia if you want to look at that. I mean, you're purging through restriction, right? You can puke it out or you can restrict food. Which way do you want to be thinner? You know, so it's really the conversation around accepting your authentic reality and not going to degrees of torture to change it for approval or for some idea of approvability, right? So it's important to understand the body image aspect of it more so than the actual outcome of purging, which is what really defines bulimia.
I want to comment on the word torture because that is so apropos.
Mm-hmm.
Not eating 1,000 pounds of food because you notice that you're full is okay. I don't see that as limiting or anorexia or bad things.
No. Well, those are like natural. Those are natural boundaries that are natural for most people, except if you feel that you are going to be deprived. That's so. Do you see where it's like, if someone feels they're going to be deprived, what do you think they're going to do with food?
Yeah, they'll overfill.
Correct. So it's easy to look at moderate food consumption without dieting involved. But as soon as someone feels that they're going to be deprived or their body's bad and needs to be fixed, it's very difficult to eat to hunger. Right?
It's very difficult
to eat to hunger. To hunger. To listen to your body. To eat naturally. A natural range of food. It's very, very, very complicated when you add shame about the body. You shouldn't be eating that. That's bad food. You know, when you add to that the religiosity of food relative to thin supremacy, it's very, very difficult to eat moderately, you know, because of human nature. You know, if you were told you are never going to get bread again in your life, it is going away on Monday. Tell me what would happen to your bread intake until Monday?
I'm not sure.
You would overconsume it. You would overconsume it. Just if you just thought about it, you would be very sure about it. Yeah. You were told you're never going to get bread again for the rest of your life, but everybody else gets bread. So you're going to watch everybody else in the world eat. You don't get bread. What happens to that rational idea of you just don't eat too much? What happens to that?
Yeah, well, I can understand why I would crave it more.
Oh, yeah. Not only crave it, but when you do have it, you're going to overconsume it, especially if you feel by eating it you've done something wrong. Like you have failed. You suck, you know. Those are feelings that you've had.
There's an unusual fat culture in the home I will be in. I won't be staying with Marshall. I'll be staying with Darren.
There's a fat culture.
There's a fat culture in that home.
Hold on a second. So what do you mean by that?
She owns a modeling agency. So, and her mother was a model and la-di-da. And her sister, who is maybe 5'8", probably weighs 110 pounds.
Okay, so when you say it's a fat culture, what do you mean?
Well, everyone talks about how much weight they did or didn't lose.
Okay, so that is thin supremacy.
I'm sorry, what?
That's a thin culture. That's the actual culture that you were in.
And my daughter-in-law, as beautiful as she is 100% of the time on a diet and always weighs a ton of weight. I don't know how much, but is always overweight, way overweight.
Yeah,
my son
Do you see that?
Who goes on a diet with her, you know, loses 1,000 pounds if he wants to. It doesn't have to. He is a triathlon, and he works out at work, and he loves working out, and he's very fit.
So he might have exercise bulimia. That's what that's called.
Yeah.
So he's not puking it up, he's exercising it up as a preventative measure. That typically comes across as some type of exercise addict. No one would see it that way because it's so promoted as if it's such a superior thing in our culture because of the thin supremacy that underlies it. But that would be my assumption, considering that it is, like you said, it's this obsession around weight and thinness, right? So the daughter, so what would you tell the daughter that is morbidly obese? Your granddaughter?
I doubt that I will see her. She does not usually see me.
Yeah. Well, she might be afraid of being shamed.
I would say nothing at all. I never have. I have never.
Okay, what would you want her to know? What would you want her?
Her weight or her sister's weight or on Debbie the wife's weight, or I just don't say a word.
Yeah, so what would you...
It's not my place.
Well, of course it isn't either direction, but if there was anything you wanted the larger granddaughter to know, if you could like send her a secret message, what would you tell her?
That if she's happy the way she is, she should be doing what she's doing. And if she wants to alter that, that she could eat more moderately and probably feel a lot better. It's ridiculous for me to even try, though. It's just...
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you do, but really what I'm trying to see is how you feel about that situation. That's all I'm trying to get an insight into.
Yeah. Well,
because when someone...
I feel badly because I feel badly for her life altogether. Her mother, who decided that she was a lesbian, which is why all of this, why they are not together, has made her very best friend, and it's so unnatural.
You mean like emotional, like an emotional, what's the word? Molestation. It's like an emotional incest is what it's called.
Holy cow, I never would have put it that way, but yeah.
Well, that's an actual terminology.
Oh my God.
It's
never
called,
would have.
Yeah, it's emotional incest. You are I think by definition it is emotionally using the child to support your adult needs, using a child to support your emotional needs.
Oh, holy.
Yeah, so you're not physically incesting them, you're emotionally incesting them, taking a child and forcing them to support adult level needs where they're completely incompetent to actually understand it or fathom what it is and do what's necessary for that adult. So it's like adult-child codependency.
And she keeps herself, that crazy woman. She is a not nice person. She keeps herself skinny and...
Do you relate to that? Do you relate to that at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how did I treat my children? I mean, like...
Just relate to it as a human. Relate to it. I'm not telling you to excuse it, but you can relate to it. You can go, oh, that is sad. She doesn't really get reality.
No.
Because it's hard to when you're stuck in that.
My granddaughter is exempt from being a kid. She's exempt from... oh my God, she's exempt from being a kid. She is really, really smart, and... she had cancer when she was 15, missed a year of school. It is true, but she's smart enough to have made it up. And she's not making it up, and she's not going to university with her friends, and she's not having a job, and she's just being her mother's best friend.
Well, there must be something in that she's, going to have to figure out. Right?
Yeah. And consequently hates my son as much as her mother is jealous of the life that she doesn't have.
Yeah, well, who knows? Who knows what what's going on in her mother's mind? So if you look at what's going on, really, if you look at what she needs, don't you agree that it's the need of your granddaughter is to feel that she is good as she is?
Repeat, please. She is as good as, say it again.
She is good as she is. She does not need to change who she is. She does not need to lose any weight. She doesn't need to be thinner. She doesn't need to do anything. She is authentically.
Doesn't have to have a degree. Doesn't have to go to school.
She is.
Have to have a job.
She is good as she is. You know, obviously the circumstances, we can wish for better, right? But who she is as a person, as a soul, she's good enough. She's a good person, right? That intrinsic person that she is. You connect with that. That's why I think you feel so bad. There's something in how you're connecting with her that is totally authentic.
But she doesn't let me near her. So.
Yeah, well, and that's, you know what? That may not be your role. It might not be your role with her. You know, it may not happen, but nonetheless.
I concur. It's like there may come a time when she wants me in her life, and I'll be there. For the time being, I really have to let her do her thing and leave me out of her life if that's what she needs to do. Mm-hmm. It does make me sad, because I know how she is suffering.
Yeah, there's no other contact you can have with her, like if you wrote a letter or if you connected on.
I tried to email her, and she does write me back that minute saying, "I love you too, Ruby."
Okay, so there's a connection there that you have. That's something.
Oh yeah, we are not disassociated.
Her
younger sister was as mean and distant to me as she, but Darren brought her to my house several months ago. I asked him to come and fix my computer because I couldn't do it, and he brought her. And we really, not only did she and I connect, but she and her father connected, and she realized she was just doing what her sister did and not even considering how she felt about anything. She just wanted to fit into her mother's family.
Yeah, never question the ignorance that she might be being fed. You know.
And
but it's real to the mom, it's just no one's questioning the clarity of her mother or the credibility. And so you gave her the opportunity to see reality, and she could tell the difference between the alternative story she's heard and the reality of what's there.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And so she has her own discernment around it. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And really loves Bubby and is becoming her own person because she can. And has a relationship with her father, and it's like she'll be there probably. She didn't ever want to go, and now I think she'll be there a good piece of the time I'm there. So, yay.
Yes, well, and I'm excited that you're in this state of mind, even more so. So as you are more relaxed in yourself and at peace with your life at this point, and really seeing things from a far bigger perspective, more gracious, lenient, forgiving perspective, it'll be even more loving in your presence. Which isn't that what we want? I would assume if I was a grandmother, that's what I would want to provide for my grandchildren is love, loving, grace, ease.
And it has never been there with the older one because just her mother wouldn't let me near her.
Yeah.
And it isn't until he remarried that I had any access to those girls.
Yeah.
And now, Anna Marie, who's the older one, still. And part of it is she's resentful of the Jewish thing. Mm-hmm. So she thinks I'll Jewify her kid or something.
I'm sorry, that was funny.
Yeah, it is funny because I just barely. I swear to God, I said to Darren when they were in such deep shit, I went, she's not going to change her mind, Darren.
No.
I think it's time for you to start dating. And I'm sure you've heard there's this thing called Jew date or something like that. And you are Jewish. I mean, your grandparents were Jewish.
Yes.
Let alone your parents.
Yeah.
And there are many girls who are Jewish who will not date anyone who isn't.
Yeah, no, that's common in a lot of
them. Fabulous new entity, and you're entitled to declare Jewishness because you are.
Yeah, that's true.
That is how distant.
Got it. You are from being.
Her terror over my Jewifying anyone is so idiotic.
Well, it has nothing to do with you. Clearly, it has to do with her radicalism in her Christianity, maybe. Yeah, maybe so she's radicalized in her own religion. She's projecting that.
And that is what she did. She radicalized kids.
Yeah, oh my God.
Anyway.
Well, the best thing you can do is just give them what it feels like to be unconditionally loved.
Yeah.
That's all you can do, right?
That is my task.
Just be there without any conditions, whether they're obese, dumb. You know how it's kind of like love who you are. Get rid of all that pretentiousness. It's like you just did it for yourself. So now you kind of know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah, I did do it for myself.
You have, and that's huge. It's a big deal to really break. You know what it is you've been deprogrammed. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like there was the brainwashed version of you, the programmed version of you. And then there's the reality of you. That, is really human in nature. It isn't Gale in nature. It's human in nature. Right?
I get you.
Yeah, it's like there is the subjective idea of your identity, right? Our subjective perception of me. And there is the reality of me, which is more about us, right? It's like very uniform humanness. We just like to think that we're special. So we create a subjective idea of what we are, right? And so if you look at dying, and we talked about this last time, going into death, you have to surrender the subjectiveness of who you think you are. Not just in relation to the body, but how you characterized yourself separate from anybody else. Like no one else is hardworking or, no, that's human nature under certain circumstances, right? So it's really kind of surrendering the subjectivity of us to understand the objectivity of human nature. What that allows us is to feel so connected with people it's like you could actually, with that thought process, connect to your ex-daughter-in-law and go, oh, yeah, she's just stuck on her subjectivity and it's a radical, like, version of it. That make any sense?
Oh, so much sense. It's like, how unwilling until that second I was to be in any way forgiving or open.
Well, that's because you were in a radical position yourself before, right? That's I've been that radical Robin too, It takes surrendering it to really reconnect with our true nature, which is super loving. Like human nature is really loving. I mean, why do you think we're attracted to little puppies and animals? And I mean, we are connected with their lovingness. It's attractive to us when we're loving. If you're not loving, you're very annoyed by their work, and annoyingness. But anyways, I'm digressing here.
No, it is such an important digression. It is. I don't think there's another person other than Dawn as the first wife that I have been entirely unwilling love in any way. I just watch her torment my babies and herself, and now I am aware of her torment is not different.
Oh, right. Right. It's like, oh, she is tormented. We could say it's like when you get to that level of, again, I use the term narcissism only because it is a radical self-righteousness survival mechanism, right? It's not just I'm self-centered, it is radical self-centeredism. Separating yourself from others on such a level, of betterment that you just live in hell. Life is in hell. You're in Dante's Inferno, burning, and you do it because it makes me better. It is torture, so going into that and seeing that and going, oh my God, that poor thing is in such a tiny little cage. There's no room to breathe.
Oh, and I will be in one of the roles that I have played in that household is Dawn is the ex and Debbie is the current, is to massage Debbie's anger over Dawn.
Oh, I'm so glad you are seeing that.
Oh my God.
Oh, honey, that was, okay, so that was the radical Gail that was doing that. That is like, let's just use our current president as an example for a second. That's like Kim Jong-un against Donald Trump. Yeah! That's what that is. Do you see that? It's like taking two sociopathic narcissists at battle. That's what I meant. Like, there is something, why would you want it's almost like getting gratification out of hating a person.
Well, wait a minute. There's more to add to that. It is my way also of protecting my son from her anger.
So do you see, though, that by doing that, you are actually causing more harm?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the truth is, as horrible, oh my God, as horrible as she is seen as the devil herself, Darren, who is the most loving human fucking being in the world, doesn't see her. He doesn't love what she represents for his children and doesn't love the bullshit she presents. He doesn't hate her to death as Debbie does. And so it's almost with a wink that I'm like, okay, Darren, I know you don't hate her as much as Debbie hates her, but if I don't side with Debbie, it's going to be worse for you. And I can't make it any worse for you. You already have a difficult enough life.
So how would you reposition yourself at this point?
Oh my God, I really have to, I doubt that oh my God, I doubt that I can perform. I doubt that I can perform that role.
That you used to?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Right, because it conflicts with reality for you now. It's like it would not feel good. Well, I think it's important to also, and you don't have to proselytize this or be anti-Debbie. Is it Debbie?
Debbie's the wife.
Yeah, versus the you don't have to be anti-Debbie.
Dawn is the...
I know, but it's like by not being, when you stop being anti-Dawn, right?
Yeah.
You have to recognize that that's not anti-Debbie. I think that's what you're saying. It's like by not supporting Debbie, I'm essentially supporting Dawn. That's not true, right? That's like choosing sides. This or that. Well, what if it's neither? What if you support whatever is going to help the spiritual, psychological, and emotional safety of everybody involved?
Well, I am now in an odd realization of how tormented Dawn's life is.
Oh, it's got to be terrible. And that she's being attacked continuously from not just her own paranoia, probably, but from the people who are attacking her for whatever reason. Feels good to attack people when you're getting something out of it from this point of narcissism, right? Narcissism loves to feel superior. So taking someone and making them inferior can feel very gratifying. It's highly abusive. Not saying that Dawn wasn't doing that, but you can connect with that's what you guys were doing. And how do you think that conditions the brain of the children who are in that environment? Not just being victimized by everybody, but they get that state of victimization, right? Which is powerlessness. This is being done to you, and you fight to retaliate, and that ultimately just ends up in terrible codependent issues, needing rescuers, right? I mean, we can just, you understand what I'm trying to describe. You're like, yeah, that's what happens. Whereas the willingness, like what you're feeling right now is compassion. How do you like that feel? The feeling of compassion does not mean that you're best friends with this person, but you can actually have compassion from your own suffering for what type of suffering she's in to be this way, right? So there's a compassion aspect to it that makes it less like war. It's like there's no point to war. She's already miserable. She's already in hell. Why do we got to try to create hell for her? She's already in it. There's a point, I don't know if I'm using the right words.
No, you are.
There's an aspect when you have compassion, there is a realization that the best way to be unaffected by someone who is tortured, who is on fire, so you don't catch on fire, essentially, is through compassion, because you don't take the insanity serious. It is, if we were to look at Dawn from the angle of shaming and judging her, we could say she is absolutely tortured, absolutely trying to survive. And I would do the same thing under her circumstance. Right? Yeah, me too. It's like we can always position ourselves around whoever and what they're doing to go for whatever reason and whatever they're aware of. They're doing what they have to survive, and they clearly don't see anything.
I was so self-loathing because I gave up this hunk of a man who makes lots of money, who's hilarious and lighthearted and the sweetest soul that exists. Marshall is not, but Darren is the lightest, sweetest, nicest, easiest human being on the planet. His brother is not, but Darren is. And
well, he might not be an enabler. There's a difference between the sweetness and but an enabler as well. Right.
That is true.
So Marshall might not be an enabler. He's willing to go, fuck you, and then get out.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't mean Marshall isn't the sweetest and kindest and whatever it is. It just means he has boundaries.
Yep.
Whereas,
that is true.
Yeah.
And ask Amanda how sweet he is. I mean, really.
Yeah.
He's been harder on me than Darren because he's been more aware of my duplicity.
Yeah, maybe less tolerant.
Yeah.
I know, I'm giggling over here because it's just silly from the outside, you know. It's like, oh my God, but you're now realizing there's abandonment, like you might have actually had abandoned. I think you've recognized this, but before, but you thought there was for good reason. So that's how we get around it. That's how we get around the guilt of doing it, is through reasoning, right? Because he deserves it, or because for whatever reason, I don't know, but I'm listening to you, that you have gave up this relationship. I want you to finish what you were saying. I totally interrupted.
No, I am getting it. I am the abandonment. I actually wondered why, particularly Marshall, because Aaron is so forgiving. Why he was so hard on me, just so hard on me, as though I were trying to harm him.
Okay.
I actually was.
So is the perception you have right now about that harm coming from egocentric guilt? Say that again. Say that again.
The harm? He was not forgiving.
Okay. So, but that, in other words, enabling.
Right.
There's a big difference. And so the other thing is the old Gail needed to be, that persona needed to be perfected. And the illusion of what you thought you were, can you see why it would be catastrophic to not be enabled?
Yeah.
Yeah. For someone to call bullshit where there's bullshit, it feels horrible. So you catastrophize how someone's responding when they're actually right on in reality. There's a reality that they're engaging with, but your inflated self, reality feels super deflating. So keep that in mind, you know, when you look at your perception of how Marshall was, that it might have been catastrophized because of how deflating it was to the relative inflation of yourself. That if you had any humility or deflated it to reality, you would have been like, oh, Marshall, you're right. Okay, I'll quit. I'll stop doing that. You know, it wouldn't have been such a catastrophe inside of yourself. No, you can undistort
and
it.
He and Amanda came at a time when I either needed to alter my life and have you guide me, or I should have let myself go. And I mean, to have her come to town armed with you, it was like, wow, I can get away from anything here.
I love Amanda. We go back.
Armed with you, it was like, wow, I cannot escape that place. And although I am positive that he knows that progress is underway, he's still a little suspicious. It's like, all right, for today.
Yeah, but you can understand that.
I do.
That's the thing. You understand now, relative to where you're at here. You understand where you were and the way you were and how you presented yourself and how fucking crazy unreal it was. Why people would be timid. You know, why no one knows this radical shift that's happened. Nobody. Because you're the only one that's experiencing it. I'm not even experiencing it. I experienced my transformation. The only consciousness you will ever experience in this life is the one you're experiencing. You're not going to experience mine. You're not going to experience his. You're not going to experience Dawn's. You're not going to experience anybody's. You just are experiencing yours, right? So only you are aware of the radical shift that's happened. Everybody else has no idea, right? All they might be able to tell is she's calmer. She's not so critical. She isn't on edge. She's not shaming people. She's not talking poorly about a bunch of people for fun. You know, just that, I don't know if that's what's true, but as an example, they'll notice that you're not so self-centered. You're actually listening to what they're saying. Your patience, the degree of patience that you have, you would have flipped, but this time you're just chill. It's like a complete shift. And as they start witnessing this reality, and the more you're in this reality with tons of movement and dynamic change in life, the more they're going to feel safe with your current reality. You have to keep in mind, they probably feel that they have to protect themselves and keep a distance or keep themselves shielded from your previous reality.
Yeah.
And you can forgive them for that. Because they should have kept themselves shielded and protected. Because you weren't aware at the time that you were abusing. You didn't even know you were doing it.
I always had a slight sense of, I'm a bad mother. Even though I acted like the best mother in the world, I'm a bad mother.
Oh.
And it really was. The day that we talked about loving my thinness more than my children just blew my mind.
Well, you know what? How can you be loving?
This happens every time I talk to you.
And you know what? I don't care. I think it's hard to be loving with any other human being if you don't know how to love yourself. You know how to worship yourself, right? That's that worship of the idea. But true love is so unconditional, and it's real and truthful. It's not pretentious in any way. You know, if you really love someone, let's use the example of loving a child who has terrible psychosis and murders people, okay? Let's just go there. The true love of a mother doesn't want them to do those things, and nor would they support the child to do those things. But the love of a mother would visit her child in jail. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you really love someone, you will go to jail and visit them because you love them. You connect with their heart, not their mental anguish, and how they resolve it through explosive destruction. But you care for that person at a level of the heart. That's true love. You forgive the soul, not the act, but there's a connect there, right? If you really love someone, you clearly want them to do, to be happy and to be positive and whatever that is, but you love them even if they're not happy, right? So what you are connecting to is love of perfection, right? So it's not just, I'm painting an opposite picture of what love is, which is if you really love someone, it's like if I love my son enough, even if he does something terrible and goes to jail, I will visit him in jail because I love him. Now I want to get to the parenting thing that you said, because when you said you believed you were a terrible parent or a terrible mother. That may be coming from the realization that you didn't know how to love them. Doesn't mean you didn't love them. You just didn't know how to.
Well, I think I've always known how to love. But I really was so self-involved and so, and the
That's what you thought love was. I think this is...
I just went out of my mind.
Yeah, and you lost sight of it.
Years.
Yeah, this was... I want you to see the parallels to religion.
Yeah.
Right, where I'm going to use my own parents. They were Mormon. And they were very, very dedicated to it. No different than someone who's dedicated to Judaism, right? It becomes part of their history, their heritage, their bloodline. They identify with the way they dress, and they call themselves by the name of I'm Mormon or I'm Jewish, and they only marry in that. You raise your kids in that. You know, it becomes very identifying. And my parents were that way, and at some point they lost touch with reality, right? So they used, if you look at it this way, there's no direct link to love. It always goes through the religion to the child. So what you're describing is the same thing. Your religion may not have been radical Judaism. It was radical body image, money image. And so you lost touch with direct love, and you created an indirect love. That's not love. That's not love. That's conditional. It's not direct. So for example, I witnessed in my recovery, I had a near-death experience, out of body, and I witnessed my mother's response to my suicide. Prior to this, being Mormon was everything to her. It was everything. To where if I wasn't Mormon, there was no way for her to relate. How do you relate to a child that's not exactly like you? Right? It would be like, how would you relate to a child who's obese? Go back to your former self. It'd be very difficult for you, right? In your previous self. You would have been shaming and put them on diets and treated them as if they're unacceptable unless they're thin with you, right? That's similar to shaming a child by not being the religion you want them to be, right? So I remember realizing that my mother had lost touch with reality. At some point, she did not realize, like she was nowhere realizing that she loved the religion consciously more than she loved me. But that through the religion, she was projecting love. It was a projection of love rather than an experience, right? It's just being squeezed into a tiny filter. It's still love. Like she loved me through Mormonism. Remember when I said you loved your thinness more than you loved your children? And it was like, ding, ding, ding. Well, that's not true. Although that's because you lost sight. To you, inside it felt like it was love.
Yes and no, truthfully, Robin.
Okay.
I was so exhausted from being a mother that was ineffective. And I was afraid of being caught all the time.
Yeah.
I left my children. I think Darren was I was on the road. My job. Darren was like 19. He met and got engaged to a woman I didn't know because I wasn't there. And I was really, Marshall was just impossible as I thought then. And I kind of deliberately didn't come home. So I really deliberately found work elsewhere so that, so
you don't think that it was...
I did abandon them.
Yeah, but that was what you thought at the time you needed to do for whatever reason.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, where you were in your own relationship with yourself and how you were trying to survive yourself, you put your mask on before putting theirs on. Mm-hmm. That's the natural thing to do. As much as it feels unnatural, it's natural when you're not surviving at all. The thought is that once I'm in a place of survival, then I can go back to being a good mom.
Yeah.
Did you believe that? Was that thought there at all?
No.
Not at all. You didn't ever think, well, when I've got my shit together, when I'm good, then I'll get more involved.
I don't remember thinking.
Yeah.
I might have.
I wouldn't even worry about it. Chances are you did at some point, but you never really got your shit together.
I remember being out of town, and Marshall was living in I left my house. I left all my furniture and all the everything that was in it, and just went, whatever, do what you want, kids. I continued making the payment, but that's it.
Got it. So you literally stopped. How old were they?
Well, maybe Marshall was 18 or 20, probably 20, and Darren was younger, but I came home a lot then. By the time Darren was 19, I was permanently out of town. And I sold the house and all the kids who'd been living in it and whatever. Marshall was in such emotional trouble that he started losing his hair, and he was terrified of being bald. And he called me and said, I'm terrified. I'm going to be bald. La-di-da. And days and weeks of fear and crying and suicide, and I can't stay. And I said to him finally, you know, Marshall, I love you. Just on the phone, not in person. I love you. And if you need to go, you will have my blessing. I love you, and if you can't stand being here, I have an idea of what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to go, you have to go. And I would ask only one thing, that when you come back, you get to be the mother next time.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, he didn't think that was funny.
No.
And,
oh my God. Well, of course. Under the context of it all, it's very self-centered when you say that. Like, for me, you think you got it bad. I'm the mom. You know. But that's funny. It's funny.
Yeah. He, of course, didn't think it was very funny.
Well, of course not, because it was very self-centered.
Yeah.
It started out graciously, which is with compassion for the misery, and then it flipped around to you. I'm the victim here. Anyways, it's kind of funny, though. I will say that was funny. Yeah, in hindsight.
I have been just hilarious.
You have been. It's just...
Yeah.
It's just... Who's it serving? Who's that serving?
Yeah. But how on earth we got to this, I don't know. But
well, talking about...
You were willing to listen to shit that was about my family.
Well, you have to uncover all
this. It is so different. The feeling I have about going to Minneapolis tomorrow is very different from past trips.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. But
maybe you need to think of this as you've been given a chance to say goodbye. Maybe this is your chance to finish this life the way you want it to be finished, versus the regret you had when you were exiting the first time. So when you go, be the loving mother that you are. Not the one that's like stuck in her own state of misery, trying to just come out, just breathe in her own misery, you know?
Should be a very interesting time.
Yeah, well, again, don't fantasize about what you think it's going to be like. No one knows where you're at. They're all expecting Crazy Train. However they interpret that, we don't really know, right? You just know what you were like before, and you know there's a difference. There's a comparative. There's a difference between where you're at and where you were, and there's a difference between the two. Basic math, right? They don't know that, so.
Well, I think that they have an inkling. I do.
Well, but it's not going to be, it's not the same as your inkling. So.
Oh, never.
Yeah.
Never, but.
So give them a shit ton of grace. Give them a shit ton of grace. Give them room to, you know, to be dumb shits and to be too loud or whatever it is. Give them grace. I wonder too if something you might notice is that they are constantly trying to validate that. I'm not going to be surprised. So just open your mind to this, that if they are if they've been conditioned by what they knew of you before, I wouldn't be surprised if they constantly validate themselves with you, looking for approval, looking for validation for you. I wouldn't doubt that with Debbie for sure. When you're with Debbie, that she's constantly going to be wanting validation. That's going to drive you fucking nuts. Because at this point, you don't want to give it to her. Not because you're cruel, but because she just shouldn't need that. It's going to bug you. And you probably didn't even notice it before.
Of her?
Yeah, or of anybody. Just observe it. Just go in it as if this is a totally just an experiment. There's no outcomes that need to be, you don't need to go in. It's not a performance, if that makes sense. You're not going to perform. Go and just exist and observe it and be in it, and as if you've already died and you're getting to be a part of it still, you know?
Please say that again, as though I've already died.
Yeah, and you're getting a chance, you know, your last chance to just be with these people.
Okay.
How would it feel? The difference in that feeling of it, you know? Observe that. Just observe your experience from that approach. I think with that approach, it's going to feel very different because you're not going in to tell them what to do, monitor what they're not doing. You know, you're just going to be present. And there's going to be a lot of forgiveness in that too. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but I'm really excited just to hear when you get back how this goes.
Well, we'll let you know.
So I think it would be good for you. Okay, so I was saying, so start with the love of yourself and the grace you give yourself, the forgiveness of your past, right? As a parent, you're right. You did the best you could with what you were aware of, with what you knew, and you really couldn't have done it any better under the circumstance. You didn't know better until you knew better. So you can't hold your past self to what you know now, and you can only hold yourself to what you were aware of then. So, but your current reality can be that love that you didn't have before, or that you did have, but you just didn't have the ability at the time to share it, to give it to without conditions. It had to be under conditions before, right? So if you can get rid of the conditions and share it, Now tell me how you feel about a mom, about yourself. How do you feel about yourself as a mother now, in your current state?
I am glad for them that they have me. I'm a wonderful, loving woman, and I'm positive that they will be availed of it.
Yeah.
And the most notable thing that I am contemplating is the torment of Dawn, and of Debbie, but of Dawn in particular. I mean, so tormented that she needs to abuse her children because of how badly she feels about herself. Not unlike me.
Mm-hmm. You recognize yourself in this. Yeah. The best thing for those children are to actually be where you're at. Right? The children, if they could be where you're at in terms of seeing it the way they won't take her serious. Right? It would be like if they got a letter in the mail that said, your mother is special. She's special needs. She's emotionally around 12 years old. All of a sudden they go, oh, okay. Well, no wonder. They wouldn't take it serious. They won't get programmed by it. Right?
She's so potent. She tells Maya, who's the younger child, that she is special needs, that she is a difficult child.
Yeah.
And that she is a special needs. Oh my God.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to tell you. If they got a letter, the kids got a letter in the mail that said, just to let you know, your mom is retarded. It would be like, oh, okay. All right. And then they go, oh, we love her. She's special. Right? Mm-hmm. Makes everything melt away. And then they don't have to take her fit serious. They can go, oh, yeah. And they just don't internalize it. So where you're at is in a position of seeing that clearly. Like, holy shit, she's fucked up. Yes, she is. But it's not in a derogatory way that you used to say she's fucked up. Now you're connecting with her from your level of being fucked up, right? So now you have compassion. And you go, oh, she isn't even capable of where you're at. She's not, obviously she has the capacity, but not in the state of thinking she's in.
You're right.
It's impossible to hold, you can't hold her to that expectation. Just like you weren't held to that expectation. Until now. Because now you're like, oh, well now I see it. And I can honor that. Like, the truth is, I don't love my thinness more than my babies. My babies are everything to me. I'd rather be fat. Yes, that's true love. You know what I'm saying? Like, she can't be held to this standard of the best mom ever when she's not capable of supporting her own self. How can you support children when you cannot support yourself psychologically?
Absolutely.
I know. So the best thing for the
Darren to help her.
No, she doesn't. So the best thing for the kids is to be shown that her mother is doing the best she can with what she's capable of doing for herself, which is not very much. But that's where she's at right now, with whatever trauma is going on underneath it all, you know? So that you just don't, what it does is it removes the need, right? It's like the expectations for your mother to do this and that and be this and that. It's like, oh, well, if I was aware that her capacity is so much smaller, I wouldn't have created so much need. I can reduce my needs because I know she's not capable. And then, so do you see how that helps the children become more independent?
It helps Darren
Yeah, just
Like,
to go,
she's just not capable. And all of her hurrah and yelling and texting and all of that is just because she's so tormented.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with anybody else. It's just, it's like having a special needs child that is throwing a fit. Do you take it serious and go, oh my God, we have to get him what he wants? No. You just go, okay, he's throwing a fit. Just let it ride. Whatever. It doesn't affect you. You don't internalize it. That's the difference, right? So. All right, Gail, I got to go.
Thanks very much for that ending experience.
Okay.